Hello YouTubers, Alaska Prepper here. Well, ladies and gentlemen, something's been bugging me for the last few days, so I thought I'd do a video about it. And it's this right here. Let me just read to you this very short part, okay? I'm going to go into this pretty deep, so I hope that you stay with me, especially those of you that don't believe that we should be able to retain our God-given right to defend ourselves. President Joe Biden blamed gun violence on the staggering surge of crimes across the United States on Wednesday and took aim at the Second Amendment advocates, saying Americans would need nuclear weapons and jets to take on the government. I'm not making this political. I would be making this video no matter what politician was standing up there saying this. No matter what side they're on, I don't care. Right? Freedom doesn't matter what politician is in office. Freedom is freedom. One thing that they always fail to mention, these politicians, when they sit up there trying to take away our Second Amendment rights, is they fail to mention all of the weapons of war that they use against other people in other parts of the world. Not even here in the United States. You can make an argument that it's used here as well, but I digress from that. But they always fail to mention how many innocent people across the world, by the government's actions, have lost their lives with real weapons of war. They always fail to mention that, and I think that's very hypocritical. The notion that Americans should give up their rights to defend themselves because the government has nukes and the government has fully automatic weapons is nonsense. But let me give you one quick example of why it is that we must always hold on to our Second Amendments. And why I agree with, I wish I remember, Take America Back. I think that's the name of our community member that always leaves, hold on to your AR-15's, America, when we're on a live stream. I'm not sure if you're the right one that I'm referring to, but you know who you are. I want to show you what happens to a nation and to the people of a nation when they allow their governments to take from them their right to protect themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, let me take a quick second or two to let you know that Contingency Medical is having a 10% off anything on their site through the end of this month. So for those of you that are thinking about getting emergency antibiotics, I personally think that every family in the US should have at least one pack just in case. Anyways, they're having a sale, 10% off anything in their site through the end of this month. So if you want to take advantage of that, the link is in the description of the video. You don't need any kind of discount code. It'll just automatically be deducted from your price when you check out. Now back to the video. Now this is an article from when the USSR, it wasn't Russia back then, it was the USSR, when they disarmed their population during the Bolshevik Revolution. I believe that's how you pronounce it. So I'm just going to read what you see highlighted here so that you can have an idea. The Bolshevik Revolution put an end to the free circulation of guns among the general public. The leaders of the uprising knew only too well what the masses were capable of, especially if armed up to the teeth, and moved to monopolize gun ownership. So the leaders of that nation at that time, they were not concerned about violence in the streets. They were concerned about the people coming together and protecting themselves against them, the leaders, the politicians of that government. That's why they took away their guns, because they're so much easier to control without guns. Why do you think, ladies and gentlemen, that government here in the United States really pushes for people to live in urban areas, in crowded areas? Because those areas are very easy to control. It's a lot easier to control 30 chickens that are inside of a chicken coop than to let them free range, right? Because if you let them free range, you have to worry about this one here and that one there and go grab this one here. Oh, this one doesn't want to come in tonight. We have to go get it. But if you keep them in that coop, it's a lot easier to control them, right? You control how much you feed them. You control how much you water them. They have absolutely no say on what they get. It is 100% up to you. Whereas if they were free ranging, they could drink water from a puddle. They can, forage for insects, forage for greens, stuff like that. I hope that you understand. And here is the important part. Because this is what always happens, according to history, when a people's right to defend themselves is taken away. It ends in this. Scholars figure that communism killed between 8 and 61 million Soviets. 15 to 20 million seems more accurate. Either number is a huge number. Estimates of the total number of dead due to communism, not counting from wars. This is not counting from wars. Right? This is not soldiers dying on a battlefield. Run from 85 million upwards to 200 million. It happens all the time. In history, whenever a government becomes tyrannical and they confiscate the guns, the people always die for some reason. And they don't die from a cold. And before I start, ladies and gentlemen, let me go ahead and tell you all, for those of you that are newer here, if you've been here for a while, you already know this. You all know that I am not an advocate of violence. Once I was done with the military, after I experienced what I experienced, and I'm going to talk to you about an experience that I had when I was in the military that will take away this notion of anyone that thinks that we need to have F15's, fighter jets, whatever it is, in order to maintain our freedoms and make sure that we can keep our God-given rights not taken away from government. So I'm not in favor of violence. However, if you study history, the only thing that can bring down violence is either equal or greater violence. That's all there is to it. You know, not candy coating it. If you want to take down someone who is trying to harm you, you are going to need equal or greater resistance or strength in that person in whatever way it may be. Right? And that's the way it is. And that is why we must maintain our Second Amendment right. That is why we must keep government as much as we can, as peaceably as we can, right now through the courts. But eventually, history tells you that there will come a day when governments become tyrannical. They all do. Governments start out as republics, which is great because a republic is the form of government that is supposed to protect your right, not to take it from you. And then it eventually turns into a democracy, whereas mob rules, 50.1% of the people can choose to tell the other 49.9% of the people how they have to live their lives. Then from that, once they run out of other people's money, because remember, a democracy, a lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to get this for free. Yeah, I'll vote for you. And eventually it gets over 50%. And once the government starts to run out of other people's money, they start taking away more and more rights and they become more and more tyrannical. Therefore, switching over to a socialist/communist government. Pure tyranny, dictatorship. That's what's always happened throughout history. So for those that think, oh, that's never going to happen in the United States of America, well, that's just normalcy bias, and that is just your lack of studying history, because it happens all the time. The average age of a nation is about 250 years. And I'm not saying that because we're at about 246, 47 right now. I'm not saying that in 3 years we're going to have a civil war. I'm not saying that. It's the average. Maybe we'll go to 300 years. Maybe things will turn around and be great, and we'll regain all of those rights that have been stripped from us. So maybe we'll make it to 300 years. That would be great. I would die an easy death if that was the case. But what if it doesn't? And that is why, ladies and gentlemen, if you read the Federalist paper, I believe it was 46, I think it was Hamilton that wrote it, that said that the reason why we must maintain our right to bear arms is so that we can protect ourselves, not against mooses and not against bears. Sure, it's great that you have a firearm to be able to protect yourself against a moose or a bear if you live in Alaska or wherever you may live. Not just for intruders into your home that seek to do you or your family harm, but the main reason is to keep the government in check, to allow the government to know that, hey, if you go too far, we are armed, and we will not allow you, the entity that is supposed to be working for us, to become tyrannical towards us. That's what it was written for. So for those people that say, oh, but, you know, guns are bad, guns are not bad, ladies and gentlemen. In my opinion, they're not bad because, you know, if you put a gun or a firearm of any kind on the desk, it's not going to get up and do something bad. It is the person behind it. So when they talk about all of these bad things that are going on, and they are bad things, trust me, I've seen those bad things happen here as a civilian. I've seen it happen. It's not the firearm. It's the people behind it. For whatever reason, be it because they're evil or be it because they're mentally ill. And I have to say that's my opinion, although I truly believe that it's true. I'll say it's my opinion because this is the internet. So let me tell you why there's no reason why we need F15's and nuclear warheads. Remember a war? That wasn't really a war. It was called a police action in the country of North Vietnam, or Vietnam as a whole. If you remember that war, the North Vietnamese, they did have a very small air force. They had a very small air force. I think, if I remember reading right, it was like 100 or maybe 300 planes, something like that. But the United States of America had a much greater air force. I think it was over 6,000 fighter jets, just in planes, just in fighter jets. It was like 6,000 or so. And we left Vietnam almost somewhat like we left Afghanistan. The Vietnamese, they maintained what they call their liberties. They maintained their sovereignty against a country that has superior firepower. Why? Because they were preppers. Their people, the ones that couldn't fight, they were preppers. And they maintained the ones that were fighting with AK-47s, with homemade mines. They transported most of the supplies that they needed to the front line on bicycles. It's because they had the will to win. They fought a war of attrition, meaning that they didn't really look at winning many battles, but they looked at surviving to fight another day. So as long as they survived to fight another day, they continued to fight. As long as they saw that their nation was being invaded, their nation, they continued to fight. And that is what you call patriotism. Now, I'm not standing here talking good about communism and all that kind of stuff, because that's the excuse that the United States government gave as far as going into North Vietnam. It's because we have to stop the spread of communists. It was really about oil, but that's for a totally different video. But that's the excuse they gave. So they didn't care. They said, I'm not going to live like this, so I rather fight. And if I die, at least I died fighting for something. Let's take it to Afghanistan. Same thing with Afghanistan. Did Afghanistan have F-15's? Did they have nuclear warheads? No, they had AK-47s. And they had preppers. And I can tell you this from personal experience. They had AK-47s, they had preppers, they had machine guns. They had just basic battle weapons that you use on the ground. And we spent, what, 21 years there? 21 years there. And again, I have to say this again so that I don't trigger people, all right? Because I understand some people get triggered. I don't have to agree with the way that the people of Afghanistan live their lives. I don't have to agree with their politics. I don't have to agree with any of that. But what I can tell you is that they won. Why did they win? Because their people were preppers. And their fighters were willing to fight to the death because of what they believed in, because of their ideology. Right? I'll tell you a little story about a village that we went into. We were looking for someone, you know, for a bad guy, supposedly a bad guy, right? At least that's what we're told. And we entered this village, and the people of the village, they seemed to us like they were just normal, everyday people. And they were. But what a lot of us didn't know is that the men of the households, although they dressed like farmers and they actually were farmers, they had a second job. They were moonlighting as insurgents. And we found a whole bunch of weapons spread around that village. So as soon as they caught sight that we were coming in there, they took all of their, I'm talking about RPGs, I'm talking about landmines, all this kind of stuff. They took all these weapons out of their houses and they placed them like behind bushes. And it just happens that one of our guy went to do a number one behind a bush and he saw this. So we searched that whole area and it was full of stuff. But it was a decoy. We ended up bringing in EOD because there were landmines there. And they ended up bringing in some metal detectors. And we found a huge cache with a whole bunch of stuff. Why? Because they were preppers, ladies and gentlemen. And they had an ideology, whatever it is, whatever ideology they have, whether you agree with it or not. What I'm saying here is that they had an ideology that we, the United States, we were not going to be going in there and telling them how they were going to live their lives. And it took them 21 years. And this is only, what, 10, 11 years after they had just finished a war with Russia. That took a long time as well. But they were willing to fight, not even one generation after Russia left Afghanistan. They were willing to stand up and fight all over again with an even greater power. And they didn't have any airplanes. So we don't need airplanes. We don't need nuclear warheads. All we need to do is make sure that we hold on to our Second Amendment. Because that is what will keep us, for the most part, free. Or as free as we can possibly be. I know that they're trying to enslave us, and in a way they have, throughout the monetary system, but they try to enslave us even more through regulations, through policies, through executive orders, and through laws. But the thing is this, is that there will come a time, and I believe that this will happen within the next generation. I wish that everything could turn around and we can go back to a republic, to where the government is there to secure your freedoms and your liberties instead of taking them away. I wish that could happen, but history tells me that it won't. I believe there will come a time in my generation where the people in general, the majority of the people, will have had enough and will eventually say, no, that's enough. We need to change who we have in there. We need to change it back to the way that it was supposed to be from the beginning. Let's talk about what the government has in order to fight a war against its own people. We can sit here and talk about all the types of weapons that they have, but that's not it. They have the military and they have law enforcement, right? And first, you have to consider how many there are in the military and law enforcement. Altogether, there's probably, between the active, the reserves, the National Guard, all of the police officers and state troopers and stuff, it's roughly 4 million. But then you have to consider, of that 4 million, how many are patriots, meaning that they love their country and that they stand by the oath that they took to the Constitution of these United States. I would say that at least 50% are for the Constitution of these United States as it was written by our forefathers. So let's say that they have about 2 million people that are willing to fire upon their own countrymen. How many patriots do you think that there are in the United States of America? I would say easily there's at least 100 million, if not more, patriots. How many of those are able to fight? Right? How many of those are able to actually pick up arms and actually fight if they had to because it got that bad? Let's say it's only 1/4 of that. That's 25 million. And once the government, if it does, remember, this is all hypothetical, okay? This is all hypothetical. Once the government, if it does, starts to assault the American people, there's something called blowback. And what that is collateral damage. So a lot of those people that are for tyranny, they would eventually come to the side of patriots. And why is that? Because when they see their homes get blown up by mistake, when they hear of relatives and friends that lost their lives due to collateral damage, that's going to turn them against the government and not for it anymore. When we went to Afghanistan, we probably created more of those T guys, you know, the word that starts with a T. We probably created more of those than there were already there before we went, because of blowback, because of collateral damage. And another thing that you have to understand also, ladies and gentlemen, is that those that are tyrants are usually weak. Tyrants are usually people that are weak, that want to make other people do what they say with the use of a pen and paper. But they are never willing to go out there and do the real fighting. So when when people from the side of the government, hypothetical, remember the government became tyrannical, and right, so I'm just telling you a story here, a made-up story. So when the people that are on the side of the government realize that they're losing buddies left and right, and they wonder what it is that they're fighting for, and then they wonder, when is their turn? When is their turn to get that, projectile through their dome? They keep wondering that. And then they keep looking as to how the government is treating the people. And they wonder, well, this is how they're going to treat me when this is all over, if they win. Eventually, they will lose the will to fight. It's like I've always stated, good will always prevail over evil. And even those people that are evil, they can't fight forever, because they're not really fighting for something. They're fighting for someone. The American Patriot, ladies and gentlemen, this is how I define the American Patriot. It's not someone that is for government. It's someone that is for freedom and understands that a certain form of government, a republic, is in place in order to protect those freedoms and liberties that we were given by our Creator. That's who the American Patriot is. A person that loves his nation, not for their government, but for the people, for their countrymen. A person that keeps the government in check by criticizing what government does at every single step. That to me is an American Patriot. Not necessarily someone that would just give their life over an order. And an American Patriot, ladies and gentlemen, is someone who has an ideology that cannot be taken away. You cannot take away an idea. Did we take that ideology away from the Afghanistan people? Did we take away that ideology of how they're going to run their countries? And again, I'm not sitting here defending what they do. I think that a lot of the things that they do over there is terrible. How they treat women, how they treat children. Heck, they even treat their dogs really badly. At least from my experience of being there. All right? But did we take away their ideology after 21 years? We couldn't bomb them into democracy. They're going to run their country the way that they want to run their country. You can't take the ideology of freedom away from the American people, from the true American Patriot. Freedom, ladies and gentlemen, is engraved in every American's DNA. And you don't have to be natural born to have that DNA of freedom as an American. I immigrated to this nation 48 years ago, and freedom is engraved into my DNA. And I am an American first and foremost. Yes, I do love my heritage. I love my plantains. I love my Dominican food. I love my Dominican brothers and sisters. You know, one thing about Dominicans and Puerto Ricans as well, pretty much any Hispanics that I've noticed, is that you don't have to know them to start a conversation. When I first got here in Alaska, when I was in processing, I was at the hotel, and they had a continental breakfast. So I went downstairs to get my little cereal, whatever it was, and I saw a couple there. And one of them was from Costa Rica, the wife is from Costa Rica, and the husband is from Puerto Rico. And now they're my very good friends. I walked by them and I was like, hey, how you doing? And we just started to talk. I don't know why, but that's just the way it is. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, freedom is something that will never be taken out of the DNA of a real American, of a real patriot. And that ideology will never, ever die. So having said that, I know I made this video way too long. Let me remind you again that Contingency Medical is having a 10% off sale through the end of this month for the next 3 or 4 days, I guess. All right, so if you haven't gotten your emergency antibiotics, go ahead and click the link in the description of this video. And you don't need any special code to get the 10% off. They have a 10% off sale to the end of this month. So I hope that you take advantage of it, especially if you don't have it. Something that I think that every family in the U.S. should have one of, at least one. All right. Having said that, have a great day, ladies and gentlemen. Hope to see you this afternoon during our Friday live stream at 2 p.m. Alaska time, 6 p.m. Eastern time. Other than that, God bless every one of you. God bless America. I'm Alaska Prepper. I'm out.